You're a disappointment, my mom screamed, slamming her hand on the kitchen table so hard that my coffee mug rattled. Seriously, I wish you didn't exist, my sister Amber added with a smirk, not even looking up from her phone. I sat there, stunned into silence as their words hung in the air like smoke. 3 years of paying their bills, covering Amber's college tuition, and handling Mom's medical expenses, all for this moment. I finally found my voice and struck the table with enough force to make them both jump. That's not true, I said, quietly. But by then, Mom's face had gone pale, and Amber's smirk had completely vanished. They knew they'd crossed a line. 1 week later, I cut them off completely, and 24 hours after that, the panicked calls began. By the time they were on their knees begging, it was already too late. Updated. Wow, I wasn't expecting this much support. Thanks for all the comments saying I did the right thing. Some asked about my dad. He passed away 5 years ago, which is when I stepped up financially. Should I have drawn boundaries sooner, or was I right to finally snap? I never planned to become my family's ATM. It happened gradually, like most toxic patterns do. When Dad died 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack, our family fell apart. Mom, who'd never worked outside the home, was completely lost. Amber was starting college. I had just landed my first real job at a marketing firm and was the only one with stable income. At first, helping out felt natural. Just $500 here for Mom's mortgage, $200 there for Amber's textbooks. But temporary help evolved into permanent dependency. Within a year, I was covering Mom's entire mortgage, all utilities, groceries, and Amber's full tuition at state. My one-bedroom apartment remained unfurnished because every spare dollar went to them. I drove a car with 230,000 miles while Mom complained about her old SUV that I was making payments on. I postponed my own education, canceled vacations, and worked overtime to support their lifestyles. When I occasionally mentioned feeling stretched thin, Mom would tear up and remind me of all Dad did for us, as if his memory was emotional currency she could spend at will. The red flags were always there. I just chose to ignore them. Like when Mom began referring to my paycheck as our money, or when Amber called me her backup plan to friends, or when they'd plan expensive outings together but forget to invite me, or when my birthday passed without acknowledgement, but Amber's warranted a weekend celebration at a lakeside cabin, paid for with my credit card, of course. Even when Mom borrowed the emergency fund I'd been building for months, spending it on a spa weekend with her friends because she deserved to heal. Despite it all, I kept giving. Why? Because the alternative, watching them struggle, possibly losing our family home, seemed worse than my own financial prison. Because every time I considered saying no, the guilt was overwhelming. Because, deep down, I believed that if I just gave enough, they would finally see me. The day everything changed started like any other. I had just transferred my entire bonus, $3,000 I'd earned after landing a major client, to Mom's account for household expenses. When I arrived at their house that evening, expecting at least a thank you, I found them excitedly discussing Amber's upcoming trip to Cancun. A trip neither had mentioned to me. A trip they apparently felt entitled to plan using my money. You transferred the cash, right? Mom asked when she noticed me, not even a hello first. I did, I replied, setting down my purse. Great. Amber needs it for her deposit tomorrow. Something inside me shifted. The money was for household expenses, I said slowly. The mortgage is due. Mom waved dismissively. We can be late on that. This trip is important for Amber's mental health after finals. I stood there, watching them scroll through resort options on Amber's laptop, debating between ocean view rooms as if my hard-earned money was nothing more than Monopoly cash. That's when Amber looked up and said, "Can you transfer another 1,000? The nicer resort has a spa package." That was the moment, the exact second when something broke inside me. Not dramatically, not with tears or shouting, just a quiet snap, like a thread pulled too tight for too long. No, I said, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. No more money. Mom and Amber looked at me like I'd started speaking in tongues. What do you mean no? Mom asked, her voice sharp. We need this. I work 60 hours a week, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I haven't bought new clothes in 2 years. My apartment has a mattress on the floor and lawn chairs. For furniture. Meanwhile, you're planning luxury vacations with my bonus, a bonus I earned. That's when the explosion happened. Mom called me selfish. Amber said I was being dramatic. And as the argument escalated, the truth finally came out. You're a disappointment, Mom screamed. Seriously, I wish you didn't exist, Amber added with that same entitled smirk she'd perfected over years of getting her way. In that moment, staring at their angry faces, I saw them clearly for the first time. They weren't family struggling through hard times. They were parasites who had been draining me dry for years, conditioning me to believe that my only value was what I could provide financially, and I had allowed it. I struck the table hard, not from anger but from certainty. "That's not true," I said, my voice quiet but firm. Their expressions shifted instantly. Mom's face went pale. Amber's smirk vanished. They recognized something had changed. I stood up, gathered my purse, and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Mom asked, suddenly conciliatory. "We can talk about this." "I'm done talking," I replied, not looking back. "And I'm done paying." As I closed the door behind me, I heard Amber's panicked voice. "Wait, what about Cancun?" Updated. Several people asked if I consulted a lawyer. Yes, I met with a financial attorney the very next day. She helped me document everything I'd paid over the years. It was shocking to see the total. She also advised me on how to handle the inevitable fallout. Did anyone else find it hard to recognize financial abuse until it was too late? That night, alone in my sparsely furnished apartment, I finally allowed myself to feel everything I'd been suppressing. Not just anger, but grief, mourning the relationship I thought I had with my family. By morning, the grief had hardened into resolve. I made 3 important calls before breakfast. First, I called my bank and canceled all automatic transfers to Mom's accounts. Second, I called a financial attorney recommended by a colleague, scheduling an emergency consultation for that afternoon. Third, I called my landlord and gave notice on my apartment. If I wasn't supporting 3 people anymore, I could finally afford to live somewhere without paper-thin walls and constant mold issues. At the attorney's office, I spread out 5 years of financial records, bank statements, Venmo transfers, credit card bills, text messages requesting money. The attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Helen with salt and pepper hair, listened without judgment as I detailed the situation. When I finished, she nodded once. "This is clear financial exploitation," she said. "We can pursue this 2 ways. Request voluntary repayment, or file a civil case for unjust enrichment." We decided to try the former before pursuing the latter. Helen drafted a formal letter requesting repayment of $127,342, the documented total I'd provided since Dad's death, not including gifts or smaller cash transfers we couldn't prove. I felt strangely calm as I signed the letter. This wasn't revenge. This was reclaiming what was mine. This was finally setting boundaries that should have been established years ago. This was self-respect. The first call from Mom came exactly 7 hours after I left her house. I let it go to voicemail. Then came Amber's texts, evolving quickly from confused, "What's your problem?" to demanding, "Transfer the deposit money now," to falsely conciliatory, "We should talk about this like adults." I responded to none of them. By the next morning, Mom had called 24 times. I blocked her number. I blocked Amber too. Then I focused on myself, ordering an actual bed frame, scheduling therapy sessions, applying for a management position I'd been too exhausted to consider before. It felt like waking up from a long, draining sleep. The certified letter from my attorney arrived at Mom's house 3 days after our argument. The panicked voicemails started arriving from unknown numbers immediately. I saved each one. Mom crying that I was killing her. Amber threatening to tell everyone what a psychotic bitch I was. Then Mom's sister, my Aunt Diane, calling to understand both sides. I didn't engage with any of them. 1 week into my silence, Mom and Amber showed up at my workplace. I saw them through the glass doors of our lobby, Mom with obvious tear tracks on her face, Amber looking both angry and frightened. I told the receptionist not to let them up and continued with my meeting. They waited for 2 hours before leaving. Next day, Mom tried a new tactic. She sent Dad's brother, Uncle James, to reason with me. He cornered me in the parking garage after work. "Your mother is beside herself," he said. "They might lose the house." I looked him straight in the eye. "They've received over $127,000 from me in 5 years. Where did it all go?" He had no answer. 10 days after cutting contact, I returned to my apartment to find Mom and Amber sitting on the floor outside my door. Mom rose shakily when she saw me. "Please," she whispered, "we can't do this without you." Amber remained seated, her eyes red-rimmed. "The bank called about the mortgage," she said flatly. "And the university needs tuition payment by Friday." I unlocked my door. "I'm not discussing anything without my attorney present," I said, stepping inside, "but she's free tomorrow at 3 p.m. if you'd like to talk about repayment options." I closed the door on their shocked faces. They showed up at Helen's office the next day. Mom brought old family photos as if sentimentality might solve their financial crisis. Helen was clinical, outlining their options. They could sell the house and use the equity to repay me. Amber could take out student loans like most college students. Mom could find employment. "Or," Helen added, "we file the civil case on Friday. Wouldn't sue your own mother, Mom said, her voice wavering. I met her gaze steadily. You said you wished I didn't exist. Those aren't the words of a mother. Amber broke first. I can get loans, she said quietly, but we can't repay $127,000. Helen nodded. My client is willing to consider the debt settled if you sign over the paid portion of the house equity and return the SUV, which is still in her name. Mom gasped. That's everything we have. No, I corrected her. That's everything I paid for. They left without agreeing to anything. The next day, exactly 2 weeks after I cut them off, Mom called from a new number. We'll do it, she said, her voice hollow. We'll sign the papers, but please just help us with the transition. 1 more month of expenses, please. No, I said, the word becoming easier each time. You have until Friday to sign the settlement, or we file the case Monday morning. She began to cry. Please, I'm begging you. I'm your mother. I felt nothing but exhaustion. You should have remembered that before you wished I didn't exist. Friday arrived. Mom and Amber walked into Helen's office with their own attorney, a rumpled older man who clearly hadn't prepared them for what was coming. They signed the settlement agreement with trembling hands. Mom would sell the house, transfer the SUV back to me, and I would forgive the remaining debt. Amber would apply for student loans or find alternate financing for her education. As they prepared to leave, Amber suddenly dropped to her knees in the middle of the office. Please, she sobbed, grabbing at my hands. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... What I said, you can't do this to us. Mom joined her, kneeling on the carpeted floor of the attorney's office. We're family, she cried. You can't abandon family. I looked down at them. These 2 women who had drained years of my life, tens of thousands of my dollars, and every ounce of my self-worth, now literally on their knees begging for one more chance to continue the cycle. I'm not abandoning anyone, I said quietly. I'm saving myself. I stepped around them and walked out the door. Their sobs followed me down the hallway, but with each step, the sound grew fainter, replaced by something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. It's been 18 months since that day in the attorney's office. I've finally finished my MBA, working evenings and weekends to complete the degree I'd postponed for years. My new apartment has actual furniture, not luxury items, but solid, comfortable pieces I chose for myself. I received a significant promotion at work, partly because I could finally focus on my career instead of constantly putting out fires for Mom and Amber. Mom sold the house and moved into a small apartment. She works as an administrative assistant at a local dentist's office, her first real job in 30 years. Amber dropped out of state when her money ran dry, but eventually enrolled in community college and works part-time to support herself. The change hasn't been easy for them, but they're surviving. More importantly, they're supporting themselves. We have limited contact now, carefully structured holidays, occasional text messages. The power dynamic has shifted completely. Mom no longer calls with emergencies or guilt trips. Amber doesn't ask for money. When we do interact, there's a new respect in their eyes, grudging perhaps, but present nonetheless. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh, too severe in my response. Then I remember the look on their faces when they called me a disappointment, when they wished I didn't exist. I remember the years of sacrifice, the opportunities lost, the life delayed. And I know that what I did wasn't just necessary. It was long overdue. The hardest lesson I've learned through all of this is that sometimes true family isn't about blood relations or shared history. It's about mutual respect, boundaries, and genuine care. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for others, is to stop enabling destructive patterns, even when it feels like cruelty in the moment. I've rebuilt my life, from the ground up. I've discovered who I am outside of being someone else's support system. I've learned that saying no doesn't make me selfish. It makes me human. And most importantly, I've realized that I was never a disappointment. I was just disappearing, $1 at a time, until I finally found the courage to save myself. Updated. This post blew up more than I expected. Thanks for all the awards and supportive messages. For those asking, Mom and I have a cautious relationship now. She's different, humbler, more respectful of boundaries. Amber still struggles but is slowly growing up. The most unexpected outcome? I'm dating someone who values me for who I am, not what I can provide. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice that hurt in the moment but saved you in the end?